Everyone, welcome to the State Department. Happy Wednesday. Just very briefly at the top, I did want to mention tomorrow is World Wildlife Day. As many of you know, combating the illegal wildlife trade is an important, excuse me, an important strategic priority for the Department of State and the U.S. government. I want to highlight several World Wildlife Day events. Undersecretary Novelli is hosting a panel discussion later today on engaging the public in countering the trade and demand for illegal wildlife products. Also tomorrow, the Presidential Task Force on Wildlife Trafficking will officially release its first annual progress assessment. And tonight, and I know Matt will want to lay out his picnic blanket to be in a good position to watch this, but starting at about 6:15 p.m., we're going to be projecting images of wildlife on the State Department C Street facade to help raise awareness of the issue. In all seriousness, I understand it's some pretty compelling images and a little bit of an of course.
Is it an open bar?
Of course.
Open bar.
It's pretty much chilly out there. It is a pretty chilly night to try this.
Open bar or cash bar?
I'll get back to you on all that. I'll take that question. All right, over to you, sir. I'm sure. I think we'll have to have some kind of refreshments. It's a little chilly out there.
Seriously, you're projecting these
We
things
are.
on the bill, and there's a place. You want people to be. Is there an audience? Are they going to?
I think it's just if you're passing by, but as somebody noted, it is early March, so it's not like there's going to be a lot of people out in the mall. But we're just trying. It's a new technique we're trying. Moving images of wildlife.
I get it, but I mean, who do you expect to see this? I mean, the only people that can, if you're driving by on Constitution Avenue and you look up, you're only going to see it for about a split second. You would have to turn on the 22nd. So other than the taxi drivers who are sitting there waiting for pickup fares, and there are not that many at that point in time.
And then everyone will see.
Precisely. Thank you.
Gotcha. All right. Anyway, I'm sure it's
I'm just delivering a
very
message,
worthy
sir.
event. I'm just curious as to the audience.
Sure. All right, where are we starting?
Oh, yeah, that was unexpected.
Sorry. Sorry.
I wanted to ask you about Syria just because
Yeah.
Over the weekend you guys published this phone number, these contact numbers for people to call in or to write in and report violations of the ceasefire. And apparently some reporters from one news outlet who were actually calling not just to, they were actually calling to report what they said were violations. Ran into some problems with, apparently with some limited, with the person on the other end not having particularly great Arabic. Is this something that you're aware of? And
Absolutely.
If it is an issue, what's being done to address it?
Well, so as you noted, we did, in order to help monitor the cessation of hostilities in Syria, we did set up an information hotline that was staffed 24/7, where violations could be reported, I think via a number of different apps, also phone, email, text, WhatsApp, Telegram, and Google Voice. And the information hotline was part of our broader Syria team, and it was staffed by State Department personnel, some of whom spoke or speak Arabic. We have received reports of violations and obviously added them to or fed them into the overall the pipeline or the task force that is monitoring the ceasefire and reviewed every allegation. But as you note, there were some language issues among some of the volunteers. And granted, these again are State Department employees who are doing this in addition to their usual jobs. But we are aware that there were some language issues, as you note, and we're working to correct those, obviously, because it's important that we have Arabic speakers who are able to field incoming calls.
Was that not a requirement?
It was, but given the time limits on setting this up, probably some of the language skills weren't properly vetted. It just was people who couldn't,
Right.
having
You
a
say
hard
the
time.
people that are staffing this are volunteering their time to staff
That's right.
it? Oh, okay. Well, that's interesting. But then again, I mean, as wonderful as that is,
Agree.
if
We
they
should have
can't
people who
speak the
could get it. We
language,
should have
then-
people agree. So we're working to address that.
And
didn't you set it up in the region in one of the embassies?
I'm sorry, the
This
hotline?
this hotline. With the
It's a
time
valid
difference
question.
and
I don't
with
know.
with the language.
I don't know. I think that just given the, I have no idea. I mean, usually I'm guessing that this is run out of the ops center, which has all the phone banks set up, can easily take incoming calls, but, and has frankly, the facilities able to put together a task force like this, but.
Is it a free phone number? And if not, how many cents a minute does it cost to call from Aleppo, say?
I believe it should be a free phone number. I'll check on all this. This is good. These are all valid questions. I just don't have a lot of information in front of me.
It is,
I think it's a free phone number. It's not? Oh,
Mark,
great.
are all of these staffers volunteers, or is it a mixture?
Yes. I believe they are volunteers. Is that what you're questioning, or that they're not? Oh, okay.
Are you sure that they're doing this in addition to doing their regular jobs? I mean, if you're doing
That's
this,
what I was told, yeah.
Yeah.
Just follow up on the ceasefire
Oh,
itself.
sorry, what's the number? Do you have
I don't
that?
have it in front of me. Sorry. I completely failed on this issue. I apologize.
To follow up on the current status of the ceasefire itself. Now, the Syrian
Yeah.
government is saying that they did not violate the ceasefire. In fact, accusations were misplaced. On the other hand, the Turks apparently are, firing or lobbing some artillery shells across the Syrian border. So, what is the current status, and how are you keeping track of who is violating what?
Sure. Excuse me. So in recent days, and I think Kirby spoke about this yesterday, we have seen an overall reduction, undeniably an overall reduction in airstrikes on Syrian opposition and civilians from where we were before the cessation of hostilities began. We are concerned about reports of Syrian regime tank and artillery attacks against civilians near Latakia, near Homs and Hama, as well as around Damascus. So we are looking into each of these allegations and each of these reports very closely, sharing them among other members of the ISSG, including Russia and Iran, and strongly urging all parties to continue to practice restraint.
But when you, let's say, I'm a bit confused on how you confirm a certain violations, and then how do you bring it up, and how do you go about, making sure that it does not happen again?
We talked a lot about the process. I mean, right, that's okay. So, I can talk you through a little bit, but, the first kind of line of monitoring compliance is among the parties themselves, but obviously they need to be able to report where they see violations taking place, and they do that to the ceasefire task force, which is either through one of the co-chairs, which is the U.S. and Russia, or through the UN itself. And then there's been networks and kind of contact points set up among these various actors to help exchange information quickly when there are credible reports of violations, and then to decide how we respond to it. These points of contact are in constant communication with each other through a variety of means. So there's kind of, I guess there's 3 focal points or whatever, however you want to put it, but there's the UN office of the Special Envoy, which is based in Geneva, and that has a small in-country presence in Syria itself. And then there's also another group in Jordan that includes both U.S. and Russian elements that, again, is looking at monitoring these violations and where there are confirmed violations and trying to address them.
What do you call this center? Is it a coordination center, operation center?
Reconciliation.
In Jordan.
Reconciliation.
Coordination center.
Coordination.
Are you aware of reports that the Syrian government has used chemical weapons on various attacks post ceasefire, post cessation of hostilities? And if you are aware of them, what do you make of them? Excuse me, what do you make of them?
we're aware of the reports. We obviously can't confirm them at this time. Our policy is, we strongly condemn any use of chemical weapons. The OPCW's fact-finding mission will investigate any and all credible allegations of CW use in Syria, and if they can determine that a specific incident has taken place, it'll be referred to the joint task investigative mechanism that's been established under UN Security Council Resolution 2235 for further investigation. But we can't confirm anything at this point.
When you say you're aware of the reports, does that mean these coordination centres you're sharing with the other ISSG members are aware, or is the US government independently investigating the reports? Is it being investigated with the Russians or in parallel?
It's a good question. I'll take it.
Mark, the Russians have announced today that they are planning to close the border between Syria and Turkey to stop the transfer of arms from Turkey to the Syrian opposition. Are you aware of this plan? Do you support it, or what's your comment?
I'm not aware of that plan. I haven't seen those reports. Turkey is in control of its own border. We don't believe that it is smuggling arms. We've talked about this many times on many different occasions. But we don't believe those allegations to be true. And I don't have any further details. I'd have to refer to the Russians.
You're saying that no arms or volunteers go across the Turkish border into Syria? Is that what
No,
you're saying?
not. But without what I think is implied is that with the consent of the Turkish government, we've obviously been aware of the porous nature of the border, like many borders, both in that region and our own. Frankly, it's difficult to keep along the Turkey-Syria border the flow of foreign fighters and other material from crossing over. That's been a ongoing challenge that we've been trying to address working with Turkey.
Yeah, but you agree that the Turkish border has been the way station for all these volunteers and
It's
arms
been, as I
and
said,
money
an
and
ongoing
all.
challenge, especially I think it's a 98-kilometer stretch of it that's been a particular challenge.
Just the 98-kilometer stretch, not the whole border.
I mean, look, as I said, it's a challenge.
Still that 98 kilometers? I mean, it was months and months ago that you said that, or that the secretary said that you got an agreement with the Turks on how to.
Well, we have been
how to
working
shut
with
it
them on
down,
how
and
to.
it's still.
We've been working with them, but again, these are difficult borders. I mean, borders are tough to control. Border security, border control is difficult. Even, like, as I said, in our own country, we struggle with some of these same challenges. So I'm not saying that Turkey somehow isn't trying to make an effort to stop this, but I'm just saying that it continues to be a challenge.
And now Russia's trying to make an effort to stop this, apparently.
I have no idea. First I've heard of that.
Maybe build a wall and have Syria free for them.
Go ahead.
Mark, one more. Lots of talks in the Arab media about the partition of Syria, which is a plan which is an American and Russian plan, governed or by the Secretary of State and Lavrov. Do you have any comment on this?
Only to just say categorically that is completely untrue. The Secretary has said on multiple occasions, and I can find you chapter and verse, that the ISSG, this International Syria Support Group, the U.S., Russia, one fact they've agreed on all along is that, Syria needs to remain whole, unified, secular. And that's been kind of the basis of, trying to resolve the ongoing conflict in Syria. Now, I think this misinterpretation comes from some of the remarks the Secretary made when he was on the Hill last week during hearings. And what he was saying, and I was in the hearings with him, the context was that if we don't get a cessation of hostilities in place, if we don't get a political process in place, if we don't end the ongoing conflict, the civil war, then worst case scenario, you could see a partitioning of Syria. That was not by any way to say that was some kind of U.S. or anyone's idea of a resolution. Not at all. We still maintain that we want to see a unified, secular, whole Syria are merged.
But now the Russians are talking about federalism in Syria too, after the talks about the
Again, our
partition of Syria.
absolute focus on this is, we have a tentative cessation of hostilities in place. We need to firm that up, and then we need to get the opposition and the regime parties back to Geneva to start talking to each other so that we can get a political process in place that leads to a transitional government. That's our prime focus here.
What do you
Please,
think
sir.
about the opposition's, or an opposition official statement that they regard the March 9th date for the resumption of talks as, quote, hypothetical?
I'd have to refer you to them, Arshad. I mean, what's my response is that they need to get back to Geneva. I mean, they and the regime need to both get back to Geneva. I can't say it should happen on March 9th concretely. That should be a date certain, but as soon as possible.
And how do you address their concern, which is that other elements of UN Security Council Resolution 2254 are not being respected, that there is not the kind of full access, there is not the kind of full adherence to the cessation of hostilities, that many of the things that they want simply haven't happened, therefore why should they go back to the table?
But I mean, we talked a lot about this last week, frankly, when the situation was much murkier before the cessation began, the cessation of hostilities began. I'm not trying to paint too rosy a picture here, but we have seen, as I said, a marked reduction in violence. We have seen some of the areas that have been cut off from humanitarian assistance get that access. We need to do a lot more. We need to bring it and provide it consistently to all places. We need to improve across the board, but there have been, we believe, improvements on the ground. Please, yeah.
Change of topic? Is that all right?
We done with Syria? Good. Yeah, go ahead.
The Dutch Public Prosecution Service wrote a letter with an update on their investigation into the downing of MH17. And in that letter, prosecutors write that the investigation does not have A, any raw radar data, and B, any images of the location from which a missile was launched due to clouded sky at the time. Yesterday, this letter from the Dutch prosecutor's office was widely discussed in the Dutch parliament. And here's what the Dutch MPs brought up. 4 days after the downing of MH17, Secretary Kerry said on Meet the Press, quote, "We picked up the imagery of this launch. We know the trajectory, we know where it came from. We know the timing. It was exactly the time when the plane disappeared from the radar," end of quote. It seems that the U.S. has everything that the Dutch investigators don't have right now, almost 2 years after the downing of MH17. So my question is, has the U.S. provided Dutch investigators with the data that Secretary Kerry said the U.S. had?
I believe we have collaborated with the Dutch in their investigation. To what level of detail, I just don't know.
Specifically on radar data?
I would assume we'd, in spirit of transparency, share whatever information we had. But we've always said that this is a Dutch-led investigation. We've also been clear about expressing what we believe happened and transpired with the downing of that aircraft. But we have supported the Dutch in carrying out, as I said, a transparent investigation of their own. I know we've collaborated with them. I just don't know to what level we've shared information with them. I'd have to look into that.
Well,
I don't have it in front of me. Sorry.
Well, the Dutch parliament grilled their officials over why
Sure.
investigators don't have that data. They're saying they don't have it. They saw Secretary Kerry's comments. They saw the prosecutor's letter. My question to you, has the U.S. received a request for, asking for the data?
Again, I know we've offered our assistance. We've worked with the Dutch investigators. I don't know actually what was exchanged in terms of information with them. Frankly, I'm not aware of this latest story you're talking about, or this incident with the Dutch Parliament. But we've been very clear all along what we believe happened. And frankly, the initial outcome of the Dutch investigation supported that conclusion. But I just don't have any details to offer you in terms of what we've offered them.
Can you find out?
I can look into it. Yeah, sure, DJ.
Are you aware of the letter that the lawmakers have sent to Indian Prime Minister, about 40 of them, asking him to explain or to look into the rise in religious violations, violence against minorities?
I'm not aware of the letter, no.
I did not ask the question immediately, gave it 2 days that the letter should have reached here.
Who sent the letter, you said?
There are 34 congressmen and then
Okay.
5-6 reps. And
Sent it directly to Prime Minister Modi?
Yeah, with a copy to the State Department.
Okay.
And then here the American Muslim organizations are reacting. So also in the light of Modi coming later this month, so is there anything you will, because even President Obama during his address had talked about this violence against religious minorities, which is on the rise. So,
Well, I mean, obviously, we take issues of religious tolerance and religious freedom very seriously here at the State Department. I'm just not aware of the letter, so I'll have to look into it and see if we have any reaction to it. Please.
There have been complaints from the former Secretary Clinton's campaign about the IG's office here, allegations that there is bias or unprofessionalism in the way he's been handling the is it she? He or he? The person he's been handling has been handling the investigation into the emails. I was reading about them in the Hill today.
Sure.
Does the Inspector General's office have the confidence of the current leadership in the State Department, including the Secretary? And do you think it's appropriate for the campaign to be complaining?
Well, as you know, the Inspector General's office operates independently from the State Department, rightfully so, given their mandate to look into these kinds of issues. They need to have that kind of freedom. But I believe the Secretary has every confidence in the Inspector General's ability to carry out his mission. I haven't seen those specific allegations, but I doubt we'd really comment on them, given that the IG's role is really to operate independently, look into whatever matters they're looking into.
Well, I guess the question is, does the building share this, given that it is an independent operation and you do not speak for that? Does the
But I did say
Secretary
that, I said
does
the
the
Secretary
building-
has confidence in the.
Yep, so you do not share the same concerns as Mr. Podesta?
Again, we have confidence in his abilities to conduct independent investigations. Please, sir. Yeah.
It's actually less about the investigation. It's more about things that they see as being leaked.
Okay, I haven't seen these, but we
Partial,
haven't, yeah.
partial bits of information.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Anyway.
the answer is no. The Secretary and the building has confidence in the
Yes,
IG.
yes. Sure.
Palestinian Israeli issues.
Yep.
First of all, could you confirm to us whether an Arab member of the Knesset, Haneen Zabi, had meetings here, and she's in town. She's under suspension order because she visited with some of the families of Palestinians that lost children to arrange for the return of their bodies and so on. So she's been suspended from the Knesset. She's had meetings here. Can you tell us who she met with?
I can't.
Okay.
I apologize,
Okay,
Saeed, I don't have that
problem.
information.
Now, my second question is regarding Mahmoud Mohammed Sha'lan, an American teenager that was shot and
Right.
killed last week. I asked you last Friday. I asked
Yeah, you did.
Kirby on Monday. Are you following up with the Israelis to determine the circumstances under which he was killed?
So we obviously confirmed that U.S. citizen Mahmoud Mohammed Sha'lan was killed in the West Bank last week. We are in touch with the Israelis and have requested from them more information about the circumstances of his death. I don't have anything further to share at this point, but we are engaged with them and looking into the circumstances of this tragic incident.
Are you in touch with the family? Because his father and grandfather, he was there attending school. His father and grandfather left Florida, I guess, last week. Are you in touch with them in any way? Or?
You know, I can imagine in terms of, obviously, and I don't want to go too far here out of respect for the family's privacy, but, in any case like this, our consular section, our consular officers would be in touch with the family in dealing with, obviously, whatever their needs were, but also the repatriating the remains.
And my last question is, today, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu asked his legal advisor for some advice on how to deport families of Palestinians that attack Israelis and so on to Gaza. Would that something that you would ask the Israelis not to do?
Well, seeing those reports, I think I'll answer it this way. We would urge all sides to take affirmative actions that help restore calm and prevent actions that would further escalate tensions. In our view, this kind of step would raise, I guess, similar concerns that to those we have about punitive home demolition, which we believe only exacerbate tensions on the ground and are counterproductive.
Yeah, but this is not even home demolition. This is deportation.
I understand.
West Bank family into Gaza. That would be collective punishment.
Again, we've seen no confirmation of this. I've seen the reports of his remarks. I'd refer you to the Prime Minister's office, obviously, but we would be concerned. Yeah, Michael, do you want to?
I have a question about Turkey. It's not about Greece.
Sure.
So don't look on Greece. Do you have any comment on Mr. Erdogan's new adventure? He said he had no respect for a decision by Turkey's top court to release 2 journalists held on charges of revealing state secrets. Can you make a comment on this?
You're talking about the reports that he's going to.
He said he has no respect for the decision by a Turkish.
Oh, you're talking about the Cumhuriyet,
yes,
the case where
the case of Cumhuriyet. Do you want to make a comment?
I mean, we welcomed, frankly, the court ruling that ended their pretrial imprisonment of these 2. Well, one was the editor-in-chief, the other was the bureau chief, and we're going to continue to follow their case closely. I mean, this is a core issue for us, freedom of the press, and we believe it's a core value for Turks, for Turkish society, for Turkish democracy, and it is in fact shrined in the Turkish constitution.
Mark, do you think that he's trampling on the constitution? There are a lot of accusations in Turkey. Do you want to comment on this?
I'm not going to characterize whether he's trampling on the Turkish constitution. I'll just stay where I was, Michael, and just say very strongly that we're always concerned when any government attempts to muzzle or intimidate freedom of speech.
You always tell us here that Turkey is an ally of the United States, but you never told us that Mr. Erdogan is an ally of the United States.
Of Mr.?
Or Mr. Erdogan. You always use the word Turkey. Turkey is your ally. You never say about Mr. Erdogan. Do you think that Mr. Erdogan is a real ally of your country?
We work with Turkey, with the Turkish government, with the leaders of Turkey on a variety of issues. They are a NATO ally. We don't agree on every issue, clearly, but we agree on a lot of things. We appreciate Turkey's strong support in the fight against Daesh, and we're going to continue to work with Turkey.
So can we safely say that the U.S. urges the Turkish leaders to respect the court decision?
Well, I think so. I mean, I not exactly sure I'm going to endorse what you're putting in my mouth to say, but I think you can infer from my comments that we believe this is a freedom of speech issue, and we supported their release from pretrial detention. Is that it, Matt?
No. Sorry.
That's okay.
North Korea, the
Yeah.
sanctions that
Oh,
were
yeah.
just
Jeez.
put in.
Yeah.
I don't expect that you're going to have a lot to add to what the White House and what the
Yeah, there's been
UN has
a lot
already
of
said about it.
information dumped into the.
Exactly. But since this building did have a role in deciding what kind of items were going to be covered by these new sanctions, I wanted to just ask the following question, recognizing that this is what I'm asking about is a very, very small and limited portion of this. And I recognize as well that it covers major items like aviation jet fuel, cargo inspections. It covers all sorts of things that have broad significance. But on on this tightening up of the bans on luxury exports, I'm curious as to why snowmobiles, recreational water vehicles, luxury watches, and lead crystal are included by name. How did you choose these specific items? I mean, has there been a surge in snowmobile exports to North Korea recently? Or have you just seen, I mean, every now and then photographs emerge from North Korea, like the new ski area that they built. And in the background of photographs, you can see snowcats or snowmobiles, snowmaking equipment, ski lifts. Is this a case of you see a photograph that KCNA puts out and say, aha, there's something that if we ban it, it's going to hurt the elite? The same with a yacht, which I assume is covered by recreational water vehicles. How do you know what to go after to target the elites there?
It's a great question, actually, and given that, you're absolutely right in noting that we don't have a lot of visibility on what the quote-unquote elite in North Korea, how they live their lives, how they spend their time, except to know that they enjoy a level of affluence that the vast majority of the North Korean people do not share. That said, I think, and somebody clearly from the Department of Treasury could speak to this in greater detail, but I think we do have a sense of imports and what is brought into the country, what they look at, what these elite purchase, how they spend their money, to get a sense of where we can apply sanctions that would cause them some discomfort. And let's be very clear, that's the goal here, is not to obviously make the North Korean people suffer, but to go after.
And I get that, but
why
why snowmobiles? I mean, how is that how does that really impact? I mean, how does that impact the elite, given the fact that there are already snowmobiles there? It's kind of too late, at least in the short term, until they break down or something. They've already got their snowmobiles, they've already got their yachts, and they've already got their lead crystal,
sure,
and their watches, whatever. So. So how do you pick them?
Yeah.
So I guess it's a question that I'm just curious about. Maybe
it's a great question, Matt. I wish as I said, I wish I had a fuller, more detailed response for you, other than to say that I think that as much as we have eyes on how they spend their money, what they look at, what merchandise, what goods that they purchase from abroad, we try to target those to limit, frankly, their ability to enjoy themselves.
Just a quick one. Do you have any comment on the reports on Philippine officials saying that China has sent several ships to a disputed atoll in the South China Sea? It's known as the Quirino Atoll, also as the Jackson Atoll. And according to the officials we're quoting, they may have sent as many as 7 ships there, preventing Philippine fishermen from accessing their traditional fishing grounds.
I do. We are aware of these press reports regarding Chinese vessels operating near Jackson Atoll, and these are in contested areas of the South China Sea. As we have mentioned before, President Obama and leaders of ASEAN countries in February at Sunnylands confirmed their commitment to maintain peace, security, safety, including freedom of navigation and overflight, unimpeded lawful commerce, as well as non-militarization and self-restraint in the conduct of activities in that region, South China Sea. And the maintenance of these principles has created the conditions for the region's peace and prosperity. So we want to see them maintained and strengthened. And we want to see all claimants, including China, taking actions that respect those principles.
Does that mean you don't want the Chinese to send their ships to this particular contested area?
We don't want to see them using their ships to exert or to, how do I put this? We don't want to see them using their ships, their navy to intimidate other fishing vessels in that region.
You say aware of press reports. Is that because you think the Philippines haven't directly mentioned it to you, or just because you haven't confirmed that?
I think we're looking to confirm it.
Iran?
Sure thing. Yeah, I said we're aware of the reports, but we still haven't been able to confirm the actual incident.
Very quickly, do you have any comment on the result of the election? I think now most votes have been tallied, and it seems like the extremists have been dealt a resounding defeat. You don't have a comment on that?
It's the Iranian election.
The Iranian election, yes, of course. The Iranian
I mean, we've seen some of the results, but I think the Interior Ministry said yesterday that official results would probably take weeks, and there's probably going to be runoff elections as well. So, you know, we're not necessarily going to speak to the outcome of the election at this point in time. We're going to wait for all the formal results to be tallied and officially announced.
Would you agree with the assessment that signing the Iran deal helped Rouhani on the moderates in this election?
Look, I mean, you know, our focus, the Iran deal, and we've said this many, many times, was, you know, keeping Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. That was our sole intent. Whatever else may come from it, whether it's greater cooperation with Iran in the region, whether it's, you know, strengthening for the President Rouhani on the ground in this political environment, you know, I can't really speak to that. The focus of the agreement, the JCPOA, was to prohibit Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon, and we believe it's going to accomplish that goal.
And lastly, I mean, you know, let me ask the question that Matt asked last week.
Yeah.
You know, you always issue statements when elections take place, and if they are held according to international standards and so on. If it is decided by you or determined by you that it has, the Iranians have adhered to a international standard conducting this election,
Sure.
would you issue a statement? Are you
I mean,
likely
it's,
to make a
again,
comment?
we have relative, you know, as Matt does point out, but oftentimes we rely on international monitors or observers on the ground. That was not allowed in Iran. You know, so we're basing our assessment on a variety of factors, international media reporting, reports from Iranians themselves. But it's, you know, so we're still kind of formulating our overall assessment of the elections. But we, you know, we don't have the OSCE or some other international body saying these are free and fair. We declare them as such. All right, guys. Thanks.